Good morning. Good morning. Usually, people answer. Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's just polite. But really, really, really good morning, and it's good to be here. I'll say a few introductory comments, and then we'll move straight into the session. So, welcome to the 2026 Annual Conference and Book Fair in Baltimore, Maryland. And my name is Kwame Dawes. I'm a member of the AWP Board of Directors. I've been involved with AWP for quite a minute, but I was in Nebraska until a year ago, and I'm now at Brown University in Rhode Island. The Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the academic programs and organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. And I am a member of that board of directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP and I do pay my dues. I'm a member of AWP because the other day I asked the question, what would happen if there was no AWP? There would be no occasion for anxious, frightened young writers to gather their collective anxiety and fright and find some peace in it. So that would be gone. And what will the world be like without that? But AWP is doing massive, massive work. And it gives us opportunity to think hard about our writing, think hard about the work that we do, and to validate something that is important in America, which is these MFA programs and these writing programs in this country. It's unique, and it's a particular thing that I think is given a kind of life and base to American society and so on, in ways that other things are trying to fight against. So that's why I'm part of this, and that's why I encourage it. So we invite you to become a member today. Your membership will help to continue that work, despite the ways that we are being assailed. We are delighted to bring you this event today, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank Mizna for today's event and their support of the conference. Yes. They are amongst our literary partners who are necessary and sponsors who allow AWP to present these extraordinary literary events and help us to keep our conference affordable and accessible. Couple of reminders before the event. Please respect the seats. I think you have some choices here. There's some reserved seats, so respect those. But of course, you've got all these options in front of you. Please give the authors about 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table if they're going to be signing books, before approaching them to have your book signed. Again, this is a smaller group, but please respect the need to get out of here at some point. So once again, I just want to thank you, and now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Lana Barkawi, who will introduce this remarkable event. So thank you all very much.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Lana Barkawi. I'm the artistic and executive director of Mizna and the publisher of our literary magazine. For those who do not know Mizna, we're a Twin Cities-based SWANA organization that platforms art, literature, and decolonial thought from our region and diaspora. In addition to publishing our internationally acclaimed literary magazine, Mizna, twice a year, and publishing a digital magazine, Mizna Online, more frequently, we also host the annual Twin Cities Arab Film Festival in Minnesota, where we're rooted. Please come see us at booth 967 if you haven't, and you can peruse our literary journals and learn more about what we do. Before beginning this exciting discussion, I want to open with a statement of support for the Asian American Writers Workshop Union, who is currently demanding an immediate resignation of E.D. Jeffreen Udine for her gross mismanagement of AAW staff. Please follow at AAWW Union on Instagram for updates and asks, including redirecting support to Staff Safety Fund. May we stand together to ensure the board implements a just transition plan that serves the community. these are organizations that we are in solidarity with, and we hold them and call them in to do right by their workers. I also want to further root us in the now by centering the grief our communities are facing today. During this holy month of Ramadan, Iran and Lebanon are once again under attack by the U.S. and the Zionist entity. Since the beginning of this illegal aggression on Saturday, hundreds of people have been killed or injured, and hundreds of thousands have been displaced. This escalation takes place as the genocidal escalation in Gaza nears its 2.5-year mark, as the genocide in Sudan enters its 3rd year, and following the deliberate, shameless hijacking of protests in Iran by the CIA and the Mossad. It is clear that this war is ultimately about Israel's expansionist agenda and political military dominance in the region. The rise of global fascism has imposed a near constant state of emergency onto our communities, from Palestine to Minnesota, where our communities are organizing in miraculous ways against our shared enemy, from the IOF to ICE. It's my true honor to welcome the speakers and our moderator for today's discussion. I'll start with our moderator, George Abraham. George Abraham is a Palestinian-American poet, essayist, critic, performance artist. They are the author of When the Arab Apocalypse Comes to America and Birthright, which won the Arab American Book Award and was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. They are the editor-at-large of Mizna and co-editor of Heaven Looks Like Us, Palestinian Poetry, which was longlisted for the Palestine Book Award. They're a graduate of Northwestern's Litowitz MFA and MA program and teaches at Amherst College as a writer in residence. Our speaker, Yahya Ashour, is an exiled Gazan poet and an award-winning author. He's an honorary fellow in writing at the University of Iowa and the author of the ebook, A Gaza of Siege and Genocide, that you can find on Mizna's website, and 3 books for children and young adults in Arabic. His work also appears in anthologies and journals, including Michigan Quarterly Review and Aerosmith Journal. He has headlined over 100 readings at U.S. organizations and universities, including Harvard and Stanford. His poetry has been translated into more than 10 languages, including Spanish and Bengali. He was the 2025 author in residence at UCLA and teaches at Pitzer College at the Claremont Colleges. Huda Fakhreddine is a writer, translator, and associate professor of Arabic literature at the University of Pennsylvania. She's the author of Metapoesis in the Arabic Tradition and the Arabic prose poem, Poetic Theory and Practice. I feel that the audio is coming in and out. Is that right? Can you hear me? All right. I don't know what to do. Let's see if this helps. And the co-editor of the Routledge Handbook of Arabic Poetry. Her translations include Jaudat Fakhreddine's Lighthouse for the Drowning, The Universe All at Once, selected poems from Salim Barakat, and Palestinian 4 poems by Ibrahim Nasrallah. She's also the author of a book of creative nonfiction titled Zaman Saghir Taht Shams Thania, A Brief Time Under a Different Sun, and the poetry collection Wamin Thamma Al-Alam, and then the World. She's co-editor of Middle East Literatures. Mona Kareem is a poet, translator, essayist, and the author of 4 poetry collections and several chapbooks, including I Will Not Fold These Maps. Her work has appeared in Poetry, Michigan Quarterly Review, the Yale Review, Poetry Northwest, and elsewhere. She has been awarded fellowships and grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, Bard College, Princeton College and the Center for the Humanities at Tufts, the Arab American National Museum, and the Poetry International, among others. In addition to her writing work, Kareem teaches at Washington University in St. Louis. She's also the translator of several books, including Octavia Butler's Kindred. Please put your hands together for this wonderful panel. And I'm happy to turn things over to George Abraham.
All right, is this on? Okay. Amazing to be here with my Habayib. Less amazing to be here at AWP, who is extremely lucky to have the likes of Kwame Dawes on their board, and I hope they worship the ground that he walks on, and and I mean that very seriously. The format of what we're going to do today is we're going to read. I'm going to have each of you all read pre-selected excerpts from works that mean a lot to you. And then we're going to open into conversation about, your work through the lens of this theme about translation and empire, and then have a broader conversation. And we'll just kind of see where that goes. So with that getting started, Yahya, do you want to get us started first?
Hello. I want to start reading a poem in Arabic written by one of the contributors to the Gaza folio that's going to be published by Mizna soon, hopefully. This poem is written by Maryam Al-Khatib, and it's called العالم بين أظافري. مات العالم بين أظافري، قدمته داخل خيمتي، دفنته تحت رأسي، ثم نمت. منذ ذلك الحين لا أكترث لسيارات الإسعاف التي تسرع إلي، لا أخاف الإبر الطويلة في يد الطبيب الأبيض، ولا أعد جرعات المورفين المتساقطة كحبات المطر. أهذي وحدي قارب يتهادى فوق جثث البحر. الشمس المنهكة بعد ليل دام، طوابير الطعام المملح، الطين المتحجر على بنطال أبي، الخيام المتراصة كعلب الكبريت، كلهم ينتشلون موتي وموت العالم. موتي يترامى قنبلة معطوبة، قدمي بترتها وزرعتها لعلها تنمو من جديد. مات العالم في قبضتي المرتعشة، خوفا على يد أمي. مات العالم حين ماتت غزة. Thank you. Now I want to read another poem from the same folio that's coming soon. Sorry, it's this one is by Noor Saqr, and it's called إبرة وقلب. لا أعرف من غزة سوى طفولتي، باقي أيامي التي هجرت. شعر أمي أحمر حين ولدت، خطوات أبي الأولى وكل خطواته التي نزح بها وتبعناها. لا أذكر سوى لساني مالحا كلما اقتربت من الشاطئ ولو لم أكن أقصده. في سيارة الأجرة كنت أغمض عيني، أعرف الطرقات مع كل انعطاف حتى أصل. أذكر كل شارع سئمته مع أصدقائي كلما مشينا كي لا ينال اليأس منا. في شارع بيتنا كان هناك 5 خياطين. حين أرجع إلى غزة أحمل إبرة وخيطا أحمر لا يكفي، لن يكون أحد منهم حيا لأقول له خذ حزني وخط لي قلبا على مقاسه. And I will read one of my poems. And this poem is called Bombs and Prayers. Gazans wore dismembered bodies. No one and nothing's changed enough. Silence crushed the noise. These dismembered bodies did not get a final hug, warm or frigid, from their mothers or daughters. Daughters were murdered too. Predators of New York and Los Angeles called them minors, called them ladies. Rumor has it, poems we wipe our eyes with, they use in the White House to wipe their asses. The dismembered bodies were smashed, their flesh came out covered in ashes, their remains were devoured by stray dogs and cats, under no rain. Gazans had to eat their pets' food, so the world brought them more food for their pets, airdropped pets of human food from the same sky that drops bombs and prayers. The dismembered bodies rotted and decayed into smashed skulls and skeletons above the ground, and the world thought, let's fix this scene on VR. Let's use AI to draw roses for heads so our eyes can catch a break from the theater of massacres. Let's speak about Gaza and kick Gazans in the stomach if they dare to speak of us or the way we speak of them. The dismembered bodies waited and waited for a ceasefire until some of them were finally collected in plastic bags, buried in plastic bags by the smashed, dismembered souls of their loved ones. They gave the bags their children's names, thanked God for His mercy. They didn't wait for His miracles. Years in a day, years in years, graves turned with waves, hopes with ropes. Bombs rained and rained, but prayers remained prayers. Their loved ones who once left, who once knelt to collect their remains, were burned in their sleep, in their tents. Tents were once white. Now they come in all colors. So many tents, the world wants history to believe Gazans must be having a picnic, not evaporating in gas chambers made of cloth. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahya. I'm going to read 3 or 4 poems. And I'm going to start with, I'm glad that Yahya read the Arabic without the translation. I struggle as a translator of Arabic poetry into English in general because we've always known we're here to serve empire. We have 2 choices, either be dead or shut up. And since the beginning of this genocide, we've been serving Gaza on a silver platter. For what? For whom? I don't know. I struggle as a translator, a scholar of Arabic literature in this country, as a beneficiary and inheritor of spilled blood. But I will read my translations and we'll have to answer to them someday. This first poem is by Ibrahim Nasrallah and it's titled Palestinian. I will read the opening and the ending, begin with the English and then the Arabic so you can follow. But the English is irrelevant, really. I was silent and nothing came of it. I spoke and nothing came of it. I cursed, I apologized, nothing came of it. I was busy, I pretended to be busy, and nothing. I sat, I walked, I ran, I shivered, I warmed up, nothing. I was parched until I cracked, I drank until I drowned, I crumbled like a fetus, like the father, the siblings, and the mother. I was then gathered in a shroud made of old curtains, and nothing came of it. I stumbled more than I could stand, but then I stood up, and nothing came of it. I prayed until, like a prophet, I became a verse in a holy book. I rode until I reached hell, I beseeched and begged, and nothing. I raged, I calmed, I remembered what was once distant, and I forgot what was always close. I befriended a monster, and I fought a monster. I died young, and sometimes I survived. Both times I grew old from all that I had seen, but nothing came of it. صمت ولم يجد هذا، تكلمت لم يجد هذا، شتمت اعتذرت ولم يجد هذا، انشغلت تشغلت لم يجد هذا، جلست مشيت ركضت ارتشفت تدفأت لم يجد هذا، عطشت إلى أن تشققت ثم شربت إلى أن غرقت، تفتت مثل جنين ومثل أبيه وإخوته أمه، وتجمعت في كفن من بقايا الستائر ولم يجد هذا، تعثرت أكثر مما نهضت ولكن نهضت ولم يجد هذا، وصليت حتى تحولت مثل نبي إلى آية في الكتاب، وجدفت حتى بلغت الجحيم، دعوت توسلت لم يجد هذا، غضبت هدأت، تذكرت ما كان يوما بعيدا، تناسيت ما كان دوما قريبا، وأخيت وحشا وقاتلت وحشا، قتلت صبيا وحينا نجوت، وفي الحالتين هرمت لأني رأيت الذي قد رأيت ولم يجد هذا. I was planning to read the ending, but I won't. I am anxious and distracted because after having been a witness like all of you to a genocide in Gaza that we will never be forgiven for, I'm waiting for news from home in South Lebanon because the last update was that the monsters have entered our village and their boots are on our soil. My parents are in Beirut waiting until the building they're in is no longer safe. It's obscene to be here in this ballroom. It's obscene to be at a conference. It's obscene to be in this country, serving and serving. And here I am giving you poetry. This poem, however, will always pin me and leave me wriggling on the wall. Her name is Huda Abu Nada, and I first heard of her when she was murdered on October 20th, 2023. And I am the big shot professor of Arabic literature, and I had not heard of her until she died. She's a poet who lived in Gaza her entire life under siege, and she called out to us when the video of her reading this poem went viral because she became breaking news. Oh, how alone we are, Huda Abu Nada says. All the others have won their wars and are now happy conference goers. Oh, how alone we are. All the others have won their wars and you are left in your mud barren. Darwish, don't you know, no poetry will return to the lonely what was lost, what was stolen. How alone we are. This is another age of ignorance. Cursed are all those who divided us in war and marched in your funeral as one. How alone we are. The earth is an open market and your great countries have been auctioned away, gone. How alone we are. This is an age of insolence and no one will stand by our side. Never. Oh, how alone we are. Wipe away your poems old and new and all these tears, and you, O Palestine, pull yourself together. يا وحدنا ربح الجميع حروبهم وبقيت وتركت أنت أمام وحلك عاريا. لا شعر يا درويش سوف يعيد ما خسر الوحيد وما فقد. يا وحدنا هذا زمان جاهلي آخر لعن الذي في الحرب فرقنا به وعلى جنازتك اتحد. يا وحدنا الأرض سوق حرة وبلادك الكبرى مزاد معتمد. يا وحدنا هذا زمان جاهلي لن يساندنا أحد. فامسح قصائدك القديمة والجديدة والبكا وشدي حيلك يا بلد. I will end with something that has no justification except that I am bitter and injured. This is a poem that is 1,500 years old. Let me find it. I will find it. But as I find it, I will tell you that I am dedicating this poem that's 1,500 years old to a colleague of mine who in December of 2023 came to me in tears saying that I have hurt her feelings. She wanted her ivory tower, and she is worried and hurt and is losing sleep because her feelings towards the genocidal state of Israel are hurt. And then she said, "You do medieval poetry so well. Why don't you focus on that for now and leave your activism at home?" So this is a poem that comes from one of the most important works in the Arabic poetic tradition, a medieval anthology compiled by the medieval poet. She wanted medieval poet Abu Tammam. And this is the very first poem he includes in his anthology. He attributes it to a pre-Islamic poet who was injured and plundered, and then came to his people and asked for help, but they wouldn't help him. He had to go ask others for help. He was bittered and injured. The anthology is called the Hamasa, and this first poem is called the Hamasiyya. The word Hamas has a life and a history that long precedes the creation of the State of Israel and the many social, political pathologies it is allowed to happen in our region. If you're interested in poetics and aesthetics, I recommend the word Hamasa. Look it up. I will read my translation, which takes some liberties because it addresses my colleague, and then I'll read to you the Arabic. "If I had other kin, the bastard would never have plundered me. To my side would have risen a people who do not bend when cowards falter. People who, when evil bears its fangs, stand up against it together and each alone. A people who come to my aid, no questions asked. But my people, though many, have no bite even when disgraced. They repay oppression with pardon and wickedness with kindness, as though God created none among his peoples but them to fear him. If only I had a people who would stand up for justice with everything they've got. لو كنت من مازن لم تستبح إبلي بنو اللقيطة من ذهل بن شيبان. إذا لقام بنصري معشر خشن عند الحفيظة إن ذو لوثة لانا. لا يسألون أخاهم حين يندبهم في النائبات على ما قال برهانا. ولكن قومي وإن كانوا ذوي عدد ليسوا من الشر في شيء وإن هانا. يجزون من ظلم أهل الظلم مغفرة ومن إساءة أهل السوء إحسانا. كأن ربك لم يخلق لخشيته سواهم من جميع الناس إنسانا. فليت لي بهم قوما إذا ركبوا شنوا الإغارة فرسانا وركبانا. شكرا.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. I didn't come with poems, even though I do write poems, and it feels right that I didn't, because what can I add to the poems that Huda and Yahya have just read? And I don't know if we can call this feeling that is in the room grief, because how could we grieve a constant loss, right? Only 2 days ago, half a million people in Lebanon are displaced within their own country. And I just want to say that the so-called Middle East is not only fighting for survival, it's fighting for the freedom of the world, you know? And the world owes this region much more. But I'm here because I was invited to speak about the translational issue that I guest edited for Mizna. And it first started because years ago I wrote an essay called Western Poets Kidnap Your Poems and Call Them Translations. And it critiques the phenomenon of bridge translation, but really it critiques the larger colonial and racist attitudes that the cultural industry in the United States has towards literatures of the global South. And I focused on Arabic. And these attitudes go from, dropping bombs, on children all the way to, practices that happen in this very room, right? Like what translations get published, what literature you want to consume, what images you want to reproduce, right? So as the individuals, the practitioners in this industry, as well as, embedded in this U.S. hegemony that is everywhere, that is inescapable. And if we feel helpless and if we feel speechless, it's because we are individuals who have failed to embed ourselves in collectives, right? So I simply wanted to read the editor's note that I wrote for this issue. It's very short, but it just gives you an idea of wanting to reclaim the translator as a figure, right? Against, again, this hegemonic industry. Okay. So, translation is a genre, theory, praxis, culture, industry, gaze back, half labor, half art, anti-property, and phantom property. Egyptian translator Samah Salim says translation is not a bridge. Palestinian scholar Dima Ayub says translation is not inherently good. American scholar Kareem notes that translation is abused as metaphor. Over the past 10 to 15 years, translation has gained many more supporters and champions. More magazines dedicate regular sections for translations, and some are entirely devoted to literature and translation. A few literary institutions also offer grants to specifically fund translations, yet translations make up only about 3% of published books in the United States in a given year. For the issue that will come out from Mizna, the translational issue, diverse translators, poets, and scholars explore a multitude of questions. What is translation? Who is the translator? Why translate? For whom? Collectively, we want to push even further and ask, what about the translator as the native, the immigrant, the refugee, the racialized? What if of translation as a tool of survival, solidarity, dismantling, speaking back, of family, kin, love, friendship, and revenge? Why translate in the heart of the empire where translation is ghettoized and embedded within existing hierarchies? Why translate in a capitalist industry that holds a fetishistic, voyeuristic, and violent curiosity toward the other? For whom does the native or the racialized translator translate? So this issue, we try to open a new space to autobiographical stories of people of color translators within the US and beyond, their criticism of the industry, their varied experiences, their experimental translations and hybrid writings involving translation poetics. We explore and engage with the work of translators, critics, poets, and artists who have inspired and formed our understandings of translation, of writing, and of work that diverge from an aim to challenge the status quo.
Thank you all. I'm really curious to talk about, maybe we could actually just start with Mona, right from that dovetailing, because I think about how each one of you talks about relation in some way when it came to your projects, and maybe that can be the segue, that angle in, with Huda thinking about how lonely we are, and these Western models of translation as kidnapping being such among other things, lonely models. These are models where we extract and decontextualize a body out of its context and then recontextualize it into a colonial context. And that is a not just, lonely feels like the wrong word. It feels like, kidnapping. It's a hostage taking. It's in lonelying. It's isolating, right? And Yahya and the kind of work you do as well with, being literally stranded here in the U.S. And being accountable to a collective. So maybe we can start with Mona. Tell us about the origin story of this translational issue, and or where did the theme translational come in, and how did this theme, especially, I'm curious about, our formal decisions to, for example, not have an open call, which is something Mizna has never done in our history, but for this theme, it made a lot of sense. How did the form of this issue come together for you, I guess, mentally in the process?
Yeah, so it's really when George read the essay, and he always like champions this essay and assigns it. So they invited me to like elaborate on this in the sense that it shouldn't be a text; it should be again a space, right? So and I suggested that we do the solicited approach because. Funny enough, it is because we are very few in this industry that I could envision an issue this way. I pretty much know all the contributors, not necessarily personally, but I, for example, know their stories. A few contributors arrived into translation because of living in exile, or because it was also a practice, and they have an aunt or a parent that did translation, so these stories that we don't get, in the sense that not only is translation 3% of what gets published, but translation itself is, as someone described it, unbearably white, right? It's really interesting to be in a society that is very diverse, has millions of people from the global south, yet translation as a practice is mainly led by white translators, right? So there is that. Another thing is like, these attitudes that I was speaking of is like to see that many of these communities who live in this country don't feel they have not only a space, but even the audacity to translate, right? So yeah, how literature is like guarded, who gets to be a writer, who doesn't get to be a writer. But the theme of the translational, and I want to give credit to Lena for suggesting that name, is like, we didn't want to call it translation because I felt like translation as a word has been emptied of its power, right? It's just like, oh, like we'll give you some diversity. Here is a translation, right? But translational, the relational part of it is really at the heart of this issue, and that we're not necessarily just pushing for the visibility of the translator, but again, how is it such a political and personal practice, right?
And there are pieces in it, and I love that, again, the arbitrary construct that we've come to know in the West as Sawana, that is colonial and that is, less Eurocentric, but still colonial, get expanded. Like some of the most interesting poems and pieces in the translational issue are like Jack Jung's Yi-Sang poems, which they're imagined excerpts of like how would people in his time react to him insurgently publishing these like very experimental illegible poems critiquing the empire and the occupation in Korea, and a Japanese occupation of Korea, and thinking about and the translational as I'm going to imagine a historical material relation, right, to that. And so they're not just rote translations, quote unquote. They're more of like vessels of potential history, potential natural relation. And this gets me to Yahya. The very material process of the Gaza folio. Like, let's speak to that. What are the origin stories of the Gaza folio? What is the intervention? What do you want to intervene in, and how have decisions like even the way we collect submissions? We've had to change Mizna's process at a molecular level to do the Gaza folio, and in beautiful ways and in difficult ways, because to actually do this work, we need to change ourselves, right? So just speaking to that about form and relation for your project, what form did that take based on your relations to your Ghazawi kin?
Thank you. I'll say again, I think it's very hard to speak this morning. Yeah, it's like I haven't been doing great, to be honest. And I think this, like, maybe I have some nervousness about this topic and about this panel, but I think it's been like that for the last 2 years. When I think of Gaza and when I think of poetry, they're kind of, I'm thinking of like the same thing in a lot of ways. And I'm thinking of water as well. That's coming from the Mediterranean Sea, from Gaza. And I think this issue mainly came from the idea that here we noticed a lot of projects, I guess, that were like wanting to feature Gazans, or wanting to talk about Gaza, but it wasn't mainly like, the process, or even a lot of the works like wasn't solely from Gaza and like solely from Gazans, to tell like really what's happening, their story before the genocide, during the genocide, and their story of leaving Gaza as well. So I really, I really appreciated that Mizna loved the idea and wanted me to do it, and supported me from day one, to be honest. Day one of like me being here stranded in a lot of ways. And this is, this is the project that we're working on right now together. And as you said, Mizna and I think, the team, we had to change a lot of things about the process that Mizna usually goes through to collect and choose the material. And one way was that, I knew that during the time we asked for submissions and stuff like that, a lot of people from Gaza, in Gaza, simply did not have access to internet. And or if they had access, it would be like really, really very limited access. So I knew that submitting through like the usual platform or even like through email would be really, really hard, and it would actually endanger a lot of Gazans who are gonna like be excited about this and they want to submit. The access is generally limited, and also like when it's limited, it's only in like certain places. And it was really, really, I understood that it was really, really hard for them to move in order like to go do their work, or like in order to reach out to this despicable world. So we simply like recommended that they can submit through WhatsApp actually. And that was like, through messages. We got a lot of messages through WhatsApp, thankfully. and we also had the option of like emails. I think we got emails, but most of the submissions were coming through WhatsApp, and I'm really grateful for Mizna for understanding this and understanding the environment, because um, it was really important to have this vision that like really works with the real ground and what's really happening there and accommodates for that. That was really important. And the other thing that I think Mizna had to change or have to be patient with is me. I think um, it's, and I'm really, really
It goes both ways. You're also exceptionally patient with me, so
I think I'm sitting here in front of Lana, and Lana is like really, really the most amazing person you could ever meet. Like, all love for Lana. Lana is doing amazing work, is doing wonders, and Mizna as a whole is doing wonders in the Arab American scene. I think it's like exceptional work. Number one. Yeah, and Mizna had a lot of patience with me because honestly, like during the last 2.5 years, I've been just functioning as like I'm like okay one day and not okay most of the other days. I respond one day and not being able to talk even to like in person most of the other days. And I still was like, I still like I could have said, no, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. This is too much for me. But this project means a lot to me. And Mizna thankfully held on to me, still holds on to me, even though like I single-handedly destroyed a lot of deadlines. There were a lot of deadlines, and I didn't meet, I think, all of them. And Mizna was great about that because they knew the level of pressure I was going through, uh, the level of destruction that I have to live, and also the other things that I was like, busy with. And I think I thought a lot about that, especially like when I came here to this conference. Um, and I was talking to Huda, I think, about it yesterday. Um, I feel like what Mizna is doing is amazing, and I think all the other parts of the world that are like demanding work from me, work from Gazans, and like they're saying stuff. Mizna did not say any of this, but like all the others are saying like you have to be more efficient, you have to be more professional, you have to give us attention, or you have to apologize. um, Mizna said nothing of that. And I think, this is important that the world has to, I think, reckon with the fact that if you want to really work from us, from people like from Gaza, from people, from Lebanon, from Sudan, all the areas that are like suffering and still suffering, you have to reckon with the fact that it's gonna be late, it's gonna be incomplete in a lot of ways. And in this incompleteness, in this way that it shows, it tells a lot. And I think a lot of the pieces that you will see from uh, the folio will have a lot of that, will have a lot of, things that you feel that are unsaid, and they are still unsaid. And I thought it was important to feature works like that, that you can feel like, oh, I wish this writer could tell us more, but they can't. And that is important. And the other thing that I noticed, I think, about the folio is a lot of them talked about threads, and a lot of them talked about needles, pain as needles, and wanting to heal, longing to heal as threads. And in that, I found it like really, really, you know, whether they knew it or not, Gazan poets are in conversation with the old Arabic tradition of poetry.
Yes.
And I think Huda talks a lot about that.
Right.
And in that, the thing about the threads, they're in conversation. They are in conversation with a great poet, Abu al-Ala al-Ma'arri, and I think he has a really great line that I think we should mention in the introduction, maybe for this folio, about threads and about wanting to be threaded. So yeah, I think.
I encourage everyone to look up Hamas after this panel, and I think that's a perfect segue into the thinking about Huda's work. There is not a single translator I know who has gotten to work and has risen to this moment and just gotten in the way of the death machine and put oneself physically, materially on the line as Huda, and that's hard. I say that as not just to compliment the courage, but to say, why do our academics have to do this? Why do we live in a world where people can't walk from point A to point B on their jobs without being doxxed and surveilled and harassed and slash maybe some people in this room, if you aren't being doxxed and surveilled and harassed, maybe step up and get in the way and do the work that will get you so that we don't have to bear this anymore. But thinking about how this moment has changed, I hate this word, prolonged torture, insanity of empire has alchemically changed your work, especially as Yahya kind of mentioned. You look at the long historical tradition of Arabic, and you are doing such insurgent, present, contemporary, today, cannot look away from today type work. How has your own relationship to the Arabic tradition changed in this?
There's a lot to say in response to your question, but also to comment on what Muna and Yahya said. How has it changed? It just brought all the things we knew to the surface. To go back to Muna's comment on translation, I mean, this is the history of the field of Arabic studies in this country and Europe. It's a product of imperialism and colonialism and racism. And I came to this country as a graduate student from Lebanon, interested in poetry, but I was pegged as a Lebanese Muslim woman who happened to be interested in poetry, but had to serve in other ways. And one of them was translation. I mean, the field serves by offering, like poaching animals. We bring in a poem into a classroom, we dissect it, we kill it, and when we offer it as information, poetry gets lost along the way, so that some sophisticated, often white man does something with it that rises above the menial job we do as translators. Or they are a white man to begin with, and their work is appreciated more than the original, because that's where the poetry and the art comes in what they do with us. So these are deep traumas that I had before genocide, and genocide has been going on for 78 years now.
Yes.
But when we say genocide, it means your genocide, the genocide you're watching that filters through your screens as you sleep. Yes, the history of the world is one of genocide and massacres, has always been, but this is the one you have been watching since minute one, and that's why it's a counterpoint in history for me. In life, nothing has to be the same, can be the same. In Gaza, there's no after Gaza. There will never be an after Gaza. But in our field, and Muna as an academic, and I'm sorry that you had to become one, you're now in this factory, whatever it is we work for, realize that this racism is deep set and we've accepted it. As young academics, we go on the market. We know we're selling ourselves, we're reducing ourselves, flattening them into something else. And to go back to, so translational, I love that. Moheb,
Moheb, woo!
well, because I think it complicates things. it makes them less easy. And that's, I think, our hope as translators, if we are to fight back, is to make translation, the reading of translation, more difficult for the English reader. They should make the effort to also come to the poem that has traveled so far to them. And I'm not going to, use the jargon of familiar and foreign, whatever. No, you need to remember this poem is good for you. It doesn't need you. And that's my approach to translating from Gaza. I need Gaza because I'm helpless. And I'm not translating because, poets and writers in Gaza are going to be better because I've translated them. I feel ashamed, actually, to be doing this work because who am I doing it for? I'm doing it for myself. And I'm always amazed, Yahya, amazed that Gazans, the people of Gaza, still have hope in the world. I don't understand how they do it. It's humbling. But the generosity with which writers I've had to have engaged with, who are now in Gaza living in tents, maybe the 7th, 11th tent that they've had to move out of or into, are still grateful and happy, and they receive the translations the way they should be received, as, art and communication and a conversation. And I feel so very small and complicit because, I know that I'm translating them into a language that is now genociding, has always been, but now is directly responsible, this country and its idiot president and all of its institutions. So I'm very humbled when you describe my work like this, but I struggle with it every day because for all the reasons I just mentioned.
And I think I may be speaking as an illiterate in a way of translation as my way of returning to Arabic. I'm speaking from my position as an illiterate citizen of empire, etc., and thinking about
So yeah, this gives me hope. Yeah, this is a small population that I think I'd like to address. People like you and my daughter, who are Arab children and people who have a complicated relationship with Arabic, and they need it to be mediated by English. I'm happy to think of that. I'm happy to think of collectives, as Mona said, as family. We need to take care of ourselves and each other because the world is hostile and has failed us so many times. It's amazing that we are still here today. What is today? March, whatever, 2026, waiting for the monsters to invade. And it's just completely unbearable.
I think to end us, what I'm going to ask you each to do is give the room a prompt, a call to action. What is something that you see deliberately missing or suppressed from the industry that you wish there were more structures to support or more of, in whatever way you want to do it? And I will say again, I hope everyone in this room internalizes what Yahya is saying about this sociopathic rush post October 7th for these useless white yacht-owning publishers to capture Gaza and represent them via anthologies, as if we haven't been doing this collectively within our communities for years, and B, mediated by whiteness. I saw in recent anthology of so-called poems for Gaza that didn't even print the name of the poets in their marketing material. It was just disidentified. Here's the poem stripped and kidnapped into English, not even a name of someone, just a Gazan poem. And again, how illiterate, how disrespectful, and how who qualifies these people to speak on our behalf, to use words like Samud and edit books titled something like Samud as a quote honorary Palestinian on our behalf when they are themselves liberal Zionists who have no politic, right? And one of the central interventions that I think Yahya is doing is saying, why is Gaza not edited on Ghazawi terms? Why are we not structurally supporting? So my thing is, my prompt to preempt before you all give probably much better prompts is throw money at empowering Gazan editors and scholars and people who are not just doing work that documents our annihilation, but is actively resisting and is actively not speaking after Gaza, but speaking of Gaza in the now as a living, vital force of people who are surviving a genocide. And and that's hard work. And when you do that structural work, be ready to be patient. Be ready to shatter your notion of a timeline. Be ready because it is going, if you want to do it well, it will happen at the speed of care. And it has to happen at the speed of care. And I'm sure that you all will give much more elegant prompts than I have. But I think this is a good way of ending of like, what do you wish you see more of?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack about what you just said. But you know, as you described this thing of like suddenly everyone wants work from, you know, Gazan writers. I think we experienced this. We saw it on the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Suddenly they care about Iraqi literature. Now you can't see any Iraqi literature, you know, in the market, right? And Syrian literature and so on and so forth, right? So it's like, great, there is a window opening, but why is this window not gonna stay opened, right? So there is like a sort of Columbusing, you know, or like we discovered the Gazan poetry, right, overnight. Another thing to say is when you say on our terms, I feel like Yahya addressed this well, just like as he was answering this, you know, thinking through this thing of like, you know, I'm surviving a genocide and I need to do this work for Gaza, and how do we do this? Like this whole side of like the process of writing, the process of editing, you know, is entirely dehumanized. You know, we are supposed to be these producing machines, as like Huda described it, you know, in academia and translation and so on. But I want to give two examples from the issue. And even though the issue wasn't specifically imagined towards, say, a Palestinian literature, we did end up having several contributions. So, for example, Fadi Judah, as you all know, is one of the most important Arab American poets and translators of Arabic literature. And he wrote this long essay called I Am Not Your Translator, right? And you can imagine from the title how he's claiming back himself, his voice, like what translation mean. And I love this side of the essay where it's like, you know, there is this intimacy that an Arabic speaker has, even a heritage speaker has, to this tradition, and how this intimacy is disrupted, right? Once the text goes beyond, like, you know, the personal space, let's say. And also how he is micromanaged in the literary scene in the US, where it's like, we want you to speak, but as translator. No, we want you to speak, but as, you know, poet or Arab American and so on. When you already like contain multitude, and when like translation poetry or like the creation poetry are not that divided, right, or separated. So some of the contributions in this issue, including we have, I think, Sarah Kamel, she read for the other Mizna issue, and she's here with us. She always experiments with a translation as a poetic. So you read her poems in English and you can recognize Egyptian vernacular in it, right? And playing on the contradictions of, you know, or the tensions that come out of this beautifully, right? So that was something we encourage, like, yeah, write in a way where we can't tell what's translation, what's your creation, right? And push against that boundary, yeah. And then another contribution we had by Betul Abu Aqlain, she is a Gazan poet who writes in Arabic, but throughout the genocide found herself writing more in English. And she has all this like mixed feelings of guilt and shame, about like, why am I doing this? Sometimes she, of course, like works with translators on translations of her poetry. And she gave me a really interesting insight in the sense that she found in English a refuge as this, not as this American language, but rather as this like global language, right? This like undefined language. And in tension with the fact that she feels disappointed with like the Arabic publishing industry, right? That didn't make space for like writings from Gaza. And it's really interesting also to see that a lot of the writing coming out of Gaza is poetry and not fiction. And the world wants fiction, doesn't want poetry, right? And I love this refusal that happens in this moment of like, having to offer, what the reader wants. Finally, I just want to close with one thing of like, again, I also had a similar experience to Huda's about like entering the US as an international graduate student, and how, translation gave me this intermediate space into like, a very massive alienating literary industry, So I entered through that. However, I found myself eventually like going back to Arabic, like insisting that I want to write poetry in Arabic, I want to translate into English, and I also want to translate back into Arabic. So like, I don't know who said this. Sometimes I'm like, did I say this or did someone say this? But we write in an English that doesn't deserve us, right? Like this is a feeling that we wrestle with throughout the times.
I think if we're thinking about actions and like what kind of actions we're missing in terms of literature and academics, I think a lot of the hope and excitement that we see from Gazan poets and Gazan writers when their works get translated or published or noticed is coming from this feeling of like very long and deep abandonment by the world. And I feel that I have felt that so much. I've lived 25 years. I'm 28, gonna be 28 next month. I lived in Gaza, 25 years in Gaza, and it's very hard to believe that I'm living right now, and like this, it feels like an extra time that I'm given, and like there is nothing to win. The game has been done. This feeling of hope is still there. There is still something here, even though like I'm very thinking about death all the time. But there is something that I feel like I still need to do. And there is something that a lot of Gazans still feel, that they've been left and now they're getting noticed. Notice us before we die. Because even when we're outside Gaza, even when we leave Gaza, we're still dying. We're still thinking about death. The second thing that I want to say in terms of actions, fuck your aid. Gaza doesn't just need food and water and medicine. Gaza needs attention to its works and literature and art and movies, and Gaza needs to be noticed in these regards too, and not just people who just need to be fed and housed, and that you made us need to be fed and housed. This is your complicity. What you never gave us, what you never had give us the chance to do is to see our movies and our poetry and our art as equal to you. And what also has been, Gaza has been forbidden, and like Gaza has been struggling with, even way before the genocide, even during the siege, is connection with the world artists. Don't just translate us, but also talk with us about our poetry. talk with us. What is poetry now? Where can we take our poetry? What can we do with poetry? A lot of conversations about art and poetry in Gaza seems to have stopped somewhere, and it's not. In a lot of ways, the world is not catching up to it, rather than they are not catching up with the world. There is no conversation. We're just getting translated. We're getting maybe published by small publishers, but we're not given the care of a published work, which is to give it care, to review it, to criticize it, to talk with it, to mentor it, to see where we can take it. Just reading is not enough. Just translating is not enough.
I don't have much to add to that, really. In a different moment, again, that word, I would have said, you're not discovering Gaza now or Palestine now just because you stumbled upon a translation or you're in a protest and you feel good about yourself. Palestine belongs to a long tradition of art and language and literature and poetry. It's our responsibility to study it in context, that it's also our responsibility as Arabs and students of the Arabic tradition to launch any inquiry or engagement with that tradition from Gaza. This is, again, it's a terrible word, but this is our entry point now. This is where time has stopped, and this is where we re-enter it or come out of it. But all this seems silly, pontification. As we are speaking now, in the past hour, neighborhoods have been leveled to the ground. People are dying. I have a young undergraduate student in my seminar this semester who came earlier this week to say that one of the highlights of her life was that she got to see the great American spirit of protest in the past 3 years. Where is that great American spirit of protest, right? What are we doing? They've silenced us and we've decided to obey. Now this country is selling arms to a genocidal entity that's expanding its genocide. You shouldn't be sitting down. And before we turn to translating and educating on how to approach the Arabic poetic tradition, there has to be a revolution. This country has to reckon with its evil. And before that, there is no homework.
And before that, there is no homework. Thank you for listening, and our people shall live.